I'll land this major contract for us. There's no way George, with his night school diploma, can handle it. Leave it to me, a graduate from a prestigious university. Elite junior colleague Michael said this, snatching away the major project contract I had brought in. Watching this unfold, our boss Alex commented, "Sounds promising. Then I'm counting on you for the contract in Africa." "Yes, leave it to me." Africa. Michael found himself in a situation he couldn't back out of. At that moment, he couldn't possibly imagine what awaited him in Africa. "My name is George. I'm a company employee who works diligently every day, driven by a certain conviction. I've always struggled with studying, never managing to score well on midterms or final exams in elementary or middle school. Instead, I aim to be the most entertaining person in class, always playing the role of the class clown. Despite not being particularly smart, I ran for class president and even served as the team captain during sports festivals. For the cultural festival, I teamed up with a classmate for a comedy duo performance, and in football, I practiced more passionately than anyone else, earning a spot in a game despite lacking the skills for regular play. I repeatedly approached a classmate who seemed lonely reading alone, and after numerous attempts, managed to make them smile once. That smile was so charming, and soon, they hardly had any time to read alone as they made more and more friends. I believe I was fortunate to have such a fulfilling school life, surrounded by many friends and juniors. However, as high school entrance exams approached, my father's job relocation was decided. It was to a distant place, expected to be long-term, so our family of 3 had to move. "George can make it fun anywhere." That's what my friends said, crying as they saw me off until the very end. Looking at a soccer ball signed with many messages, I felt sad, realizing that even if I returned, everyone would have moved on to different lives. In a new place with no acquaintances and little love for studying, the idea of commuting 2 hours to high school didn't appeal to me, so I chose not to take the entrance exams. Understanding my feelings, my parents allowed me to start working part-time at a gas station. At first, I didn't just understand anything at all. But the manager and the staff at my part-time job were also kind and nice that, by just keeping a smile on my face, I quickly became close to everyone. We would visit each other's homes and go out for meals, actively engaging with people around us. Gradually, I got the hang of the job. Despite initial anxieties, laughing through it taught me that everything would be all right in this new place. However, about a month after moving, I suffered severe nausea and fever one night and had to wake my sleeping parents. In a panic, they called for an ambulance but were turned down by several places, so my father decided to drive me to the hospital. I was jostled for about 4 hours in the car driven by my father, heading to the hospital. In the car, I was deliriously saying, "I want to go home." Surely, it wasn't just that I wanted to return to our house. Perhaps I longed to go back to that day. I still feel a deep nostalgia for the place I grew up, even though I find fulfillment in my daily life now. The silent apology from my father was hard to distinguish between reality and a dream. By the time we reached the hospital, I could barely walk straight due to my blurred vision. As I was carried to the bed by my father, I wondered if this hospital didn't even have wheelchairs. After that, it seems I was mostly unconscious, as if asleep. "It's good that you had a car. If we had been half a day later, there might have been nothing we could do," I heard someone say in the distance. I didn't hear the diagnosis clearly, but they talked about it being a contagious disease and needing to stay hospitalized until all the bad bacteria were expelled from my body. My father had to return to work the next day but said my mother would bring my things. The next day, I felt surprisingly fine, as if the previous day's sickness was a lie. Looking at the 4 connected to my arm, I was amazed by the power of medicine. "Good morning, George. How are you feeling?" A female doctor approached my bedside, comparing my face with my chart. "Ah, good morning. I'm feeling much better, thank you. Your complexion isn't bad, and your blood pressure is normal. You're fully conscious too. You'll need to stay hospitalized for a week until all the bad bacteria are gone, but once you're here, you're going to be okay. I told your father to. How lucky it was that he had a car." "There aren't many hospitals around this area, are there?" "That's right. Just a fever, just dehydration, but without proper treatment, it could be dangerous." I glanced at the name tag hanging around the neck of the female doctor who was looking down at the chart. It read Dr. Emily Johnson. She might be around 30 years old. I thought she was a woman with beautiful, downcast eyes. "You were lucky, George." A mother carrying a small child came in crying, begging for help, but even after doing everything we could for that child, and even though they finally made it to this small hospital, "I'm sorry, I just needed someone to listen. But I've spoken too much. I fail as a doctor, I guess." "Not at all. I'd like to hear more about your experiences." Dr. Johnson, surprised, then smiled warmly. After her shift, Dr. Johnson, now in casual clothes, shared various stories with me about critically ill patients who took hours to be brought to this hospital, about children dying because their consultation was delayed. Moreover, natural disasters are frequent, blocking roads and necessitating large-scale emergency medical responses. But she couldn't overlook the patients brought to her. Parents ready to take their barely clinging to life children home because they couldn't afford the medical bills, despite the scarce medicine and beds. Initially, overwhelmed by the number of lives she couldn't save, she questioned her decision to continue as a doctor in this place daily. However, she concluded with a smile that as long as there was one life she could save, she would stay here. I was deeply moved by Dr. Johnson's strong conviction. We talked many times until my discharge, and she gave me various advice about the future. Going to medical school. I wonder. After being discharged, I discussed with my parents the possibility of becoming a doctor, but they gently suggested it might be difficult with my academic background. Dr. Johnson had taught me at the hospital that there are many jobs where one can be involved in health care, even if not as a doctor. However, she also mentioned it would be good to have a high school diploma. Eventually, my father's transfer ended, and we returned to our hometown. I reunited with classmates who had gone on to study and live normally. "Hey George, long time no see, you've gotten tan." "Hey, long time. You guys still playing football?" The football club kind of fell apart after the star player, number 10, started dating with one of cheerleader girls. Really, I thought to myself how peaceful it was. If I hadn't moved, would I have also fallen in love like everyone else, detouring on my way home to talk about yesterday's TV show, living an ordinary yet happy life? Over these years, I believe everyone has been living desperately, each harboring their thoughts and feelings. However, we enjoyed idle chatter at fast food restaurant after extracurricular activities. Though invisible, I definitely felt a barrier between us. I studied hard while working part-time. I wanted to study, even from now. I decided to make up for lost time. Not wanting to waste even a moment, and not wishing to mix into a regular high school experience at this point, I enrolled in a night school. Contrary to the troubled student image often portrayed in dramas, my night school peers were all seriously dedicated to their studies. Some were even older than me. Their longer life experiences provided valuable lessons. "Why did you start attending night school, Tyler?" Tyler, always in work clothes, rushing into the classroom just in time for the bell to start. He's currently an employee at a local factory, but he shared his plans to eventually start his own business. He admitted to having gotten into trouble a lot in the past and barely attended school. He thought acting tough was cool, but once he entered society, he realized how little he knew and felt embarrassed time and again. He laughed, saying he was determined to prove wrong those who had laughed at him. to build a big company that would outshine them all. I was surprised to find out he was only a year older than me, thinking he was in his late 20s. I figured the weight of a life full of ups and downs must be the reason. You should also consider your dream, George. Tyler slapped me hard on the back, his back looking incredibly strong as he did so. And so, I was able to graduate from night school without any issues. Somehow, I managed to pass the exams and, thanks to my strong interview skills, landed a job at the medical equipment manufacturer I had hoped for. I often got laughed at for my struggle with math, but I made sure never to make the same mistake twice by taking diligent notes and was recognized for my eager work attitude by my supervisors and seniors. Perhaps due to actively engaging with others, like I did in elementary and middle school, my work gradually started to get acknowledged. A few years after joining the company, while continuing my studies and working through busy days, I ended up having subordinates. And then, a junior named Michael transferred to our department. This Michael was quite the character. As a department leader, I was the first to speak to him. "Nice to meet you, I'm George. I'm the leader of this department, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask." I hadn't known his name yet, so I glanced at his name tag. "I'm Michael," he said, diverting his gaze and scanning the department. Trying to cover up my confusion, I kept talking in my usual manner. "That's a nice name. Your parents must have put a lot of thought into it. Could you not discuss personal matters so openly in front of everyone, or is it normal here to share everything? Though everyone know that George didn't finish middle school. My bad. For the record, I did graduate high school, even if it was a night school." "Yes, I know. I'm well connected with HR. Well, a night school diploma is hardly worth anything, right? Maybe you should have researched the personnel transferring to your department beforehand." The department became uneasy. Michael had graduated from the prestigious private university School of Business and wanted to test his abilities in a completely different field. I felt uncomfortable, but I maintained a smiling facade in my professional interactions. Perhaps that got under his skin. Michael deliberately did the opposite of what I instructed, and when mistakes arose from his actions, he dumped them on me, forcing me to handle the overtime work. Such menial tasks, even a night school grad can handle them, right? No need for an elite like me. He kept bringing up academic credentials, pushing me to my limit. Alex, having seen this behavior, suggested taking some action, but I asked to be the one to guide him, given that he was, after all, my junior. I thought that interacting with him might prove beneficial in the long run, and I was curious to hear Michael's true thoughts someday. However, my hopes hardly reached him, as Michael would disappear for 30 minutes during cigarette breaks. During these days, a request for a quote for a large medical equipment deal from overseas arrived. It was a crucial project that everyone in the department agreed we couldn't miss. This could be the biggest contract since I started working at the company. Just as I began compiling the documents, "I'll go," Michael eagerly volunteered. "I'll secure the contract for us. Impossible for George, a night school grad. Leave it to me, a graduate of a prestigious private university." With that, Michael snatched the documents from my hands and started arranging them on his desk. Alex sighed as if he had made up his mind after seeing this. "Reliable indeed. Then I'm counting on you for the contract in Africa." "Yes, leave it to me. Africa." "Yes, the Republic of Mozambique in Africa. About a 26-hour one-way trip." Okay." Alex and I exchanged looks and nodded. "Let's send Michael alone. He needs to learn a few things. Use those management skills you honed at your prestigious private university to their fullest." "Yes, okay." His confidence from moments ago vanished, leaving only a nervous reply. Worried that Michael might have overlooked something in the documents while distracted, I secretly reviewed them after he left and, sure enough, found and corrected the missing parts. A few days later, as expected, I received a call from Michael. Judging by the timing, he was probably in a taxi from the airport to the destination and just arrived near the site. It's something that would make the highly educated shake their heads in disbelief. "Hello, what's up? Please, help me." I silently checked the time while holding my cell phone to my ear. "I can communicate with anyone here." "Well, you're in Mozambique. You could have figured that out with a bit of research." "I'm using a Portuguese translator, but it's not working. What should I do?" Imagining Michael's near-tears face, I couldn't help but find it amusing. "Well, you're in the countryside. You need to speak the local language. Have you arrived at your destination yet?" "The local language. I've been in this taxi for over an hour, but we seem to be driving through places that don't look like roads. I'm not even sure we'll get there. I'm lost." Irritated by his sniffling, I ended the call. It seemed he would arrive around the same time as expected. After discussing with Alex, we concluded that letting Michael go alone was too much to handle. Since it was originally my project, I decided to follow up and support him. For Michael's growth, for the company, and because I had grown fond of the African lands during my father's transfer, I wanted to return. As the taxi jostled me, I reminisced about the past. The kind manager and co-workers from my part-time job. They taught me, word by word, when I knew nothing. My friends taught me to stay positive and that everything would work out with a smile. And Dr. Emily Johnson, who taught me the importance of holding on to convictions. Lost in memories, I arrived before I knew it. Michael was found crouching under a tree, holding his head. "What are you doing?" "Taking a break as usual." "George, why are you here?" Michael stood up, staggering towards me, clinging on for support. His eyes were filled with tears. "I will explain later. Let's go." "But if we can't communicate, how are we supposed to secure the contract?" Ignoring him, I quickly entered the facility. After informing the receptionist of the contact person's name, we were led to a private room. There was hand sanitizer at the entrance and extra wheelchairs available. It was a well-equipped new hospital. The deal went smoothly in Portuguese, and we received the signature. When I mentioned wanting to greet the facility's director, they told us to wait while they called them over. "George, you can speak Portuguese." "Not just Portuguese. Umbundu, Kimbandu, and a bit of Czechwana that I was taught." "So, you understood everything." As the door opened, Michael and I stood up. "Dr. Johnson." "Ah, the American boy from back then. I'm George. You remember me." "What a surprise. I never thought you'd actually be working in the medical field." We exchanged a warm handshake. There was too much we wanted to talk and ask about, not enough time. We exchanged contact information, promising to meet again. Seeing Dr. Johnson unchanged from those days and realizing how far I've come was profoundly gratifying. My heart was full. On the taxi ride back, Michael spoke to me. "Why, how did you, a night school grad, manage to learn so many languages? Do you always have to mention educational backgrounds?" "Actually, I came here during middle school because of my father's transfer. We were in Angola, where Portuguese is the official language. At first, I didn't understand anything and wanted to go home, but living in America, I'd never have experienced surviving in a place where unknown languages were spoken all around me, so I decided to dive in. Plus, everyone was so nice and always smiling. They taught me that with a smile, anything is possible. Compared to the barriers of youth, language barriers are nothing. I thought of my classmates who continued their unchanged lives in our hometown after I left, feeling a pang in my chest. I just did the best I could at the time, same as everyone else. "You worked hard for your exams too, right?" "Well, yeah." Michael fell silent, looking out the window. "Thank you." "Why so sudden? Kinda creepy, man." In my family, everyone emphasizes educational background, all having graduated from prestigious universities. Academic background again, huh? Yes, that's true, but it's different. My grandfather and father both graduated from T University, my mother from K University, and my brother from O University. Then there's me, who didn't make it into my first choice and ended up at private A University. Even though a university is considered prestigious by society, my family always ridiculed me for it. It's frustrating. But I wasn't clever enough to talk back to them. I was just a bundle of complexes. So, outside the house, I had to pretend. Looking down on anyone I felt was beneath me, just to maintain my self-esteem. It was as if I couldn't see anyone but myself. I felt a bit of sorry for the deflated and slumped Michael. In such a family environment, it might indeed be hard to have empathy for others. I'm sorry, you were impressive, handling the contract in Portuguese. Academic background doesn't matter, right? I've always wanted someone to tell me that what's important isn't your educational background, that a person can be measured just by their degrees. I'm glad you finally said it. Michael apologized sincerely. I ruffled his hair affectionately in response. I was again reminded of how grateful I am to have come to this place. Had even one thing been missing, neither the person I am now, nor my relationship with Michael would exist. Back in America, Michael and I went to a bar. Dr. Johnson contacted us, saying she was back in America, so the three of us met up. Dr. Johnson, tearing up while biting into the steaming macaroni and cheese, said American food was the best. She looked just as beautiful as she did back then. Michael, now in high spirits, downed his sake. Dr. Johnson had been working as a doctor while also involved in establishing hospitals. She wanted to build hospitals in areas without any, fighting various battles with the sole purpose of saving as many lives as possible. Now she had risen to the position of project leader. It must have been a challenging journey. Compared to Dr. Johnson, who has made a global impact, I still have much to learn. But considering I was just a patient back then and now work for a medical equipment manufacturer involved in saving lives, and have reunited with Dr. Johnson, it's something I'm proud of. We were overwhelmed with the realization of our dreams. All right, let's toast. We're going to save the world. A tipsy Michael raised his glass. The other customers in the restaurant turned around, laughing and applauding. I thought, what a warm country this is. All three of us emptied our glasses of wine. Everyone in the department was surprised by the change in my relationship with Michael. Only Alex seemed to understand everything, nodding with a smile. He said it was a bit scary how things went exactly as planned. The HR person who had sensed Michael's true nature from the start really had an eye for talent. Michael and I continued to be responsible for delivering equipment to Africa. We signed a contract with the hospital Dr. Johnson established and flew to Africa several times. Each time we met Dr. Johnson, we had passionate conversations. Michael and I were on a bus heading to an African hospital, an hour and a half into the journey. Even in such a remote island nation, there were settlements of people waiting for medical aid. And Dr. Johnson had built a hospital to save those people. I resolved to continue doing my best in whatever way I can. As I was lost in these thoughts, rocked by the bus, about an hour and a half must have passed. Without any warning, a torrential rain suddenly began to pour down. The interior of the bus started to buzz with an ease. This sudden downpour wasn't predicted by the weather forecast. I broke out in an uncomfortable sweat. Michael, sitting next to me, also looked anxious. I tried calling the hospital we were delivering to with my cell phone, but it was either busy or didn't connect after several attempts. The rain obscured the view, and eventually, the bus stopped. Passengers and the driver were exchanging words in Portuguese. We can reach our destination by walking if we stop here. It's impossible to go any further. I can't see where the road ends and the river begins. Then what are we supposed to do? Do whatever you want. We can only stay inside the bus until the rain stops. If the bus gets flooded, climb to the roof. Wait for help. That's all we can do." The driver's words made sense. Checking the map, there were no facilities nearby to take shelter in, so waiting for the rain to stop seemed like the only option. The hospital remained unreachable. Concerned about my phone's battery, I contacted the company and also reached out to Alex. Then, I called Dr. Johnson's cell phone number. After a few rings, it went to voicemail. "Dr. Johnson, this is George. We're currently stuck in a bus headed to Hospital A due to a sudden downpour and won't be able to make our 11 a.m. delivery. I can get through to the hospital either. Please call back when you hear this." After hanging up, I looked around the bus. Passengers were panicking, some praying silently, and the driver, who was trying to call for help without success, was tuning the radio. The rain intensified, and water began seeping into the bus. The driver, seemingly giving up, turned off the engine. Children were crying. Parents hugged their children, praying. I felt utterly powerless. The water level rose above the seats, and the wind grew stronger. Despite the high temperature, if this continued, we risked hypothermia or drowning. "Are we going to end up dying here? Don't be ridiculous. You can whine all you want later. Right now, focus on surviving." Even as I said that, I shivered with cold from the rainwater that had reached my knees. How long had it been? Dr. Johnson called back. "Hello, this is George. Where are you now? Have emergency services arrived? Are there any injured?" After explaining our situation, Dr. Johnson said her hospital was also flooded, receiving a steady flow of emergency patients, and they were short on ambulances. Her calm and warm voice almost made me cry. "Don't worry, the rain will stop. We will definitely save you. The lives you can save are for you to protect. Understand?" Yes. Dr. Johnson's words were like medicine to my weakened spirit. I clenched my fist tightly and stood up. "Everyone, the water level will surpass our height if we stay here. We need to climb onto the roof of the bus and wait for rescue. This American man and the driver will go up first and will prioritize helping children and women." Speaking in Portuguese, the driver and passengers cooperated, and we all managed to climb onto the roof. The muddy rainwater had reached above our chests. While on the roof, I went around asking if there were any injured or sick. As the rain gradually lightened, cheers of joy began to rise. And then, through the thinning clouds, a ray of sunlight shone down. It was a more striking scene than any I had ever witnessed. I let out a sigh of relief. Some time later, the rescue team arrived. Everyone was safely rescued, and both Michael and I were transported to the nearest hospital. Since there were no health issues, we decided to stay at a hotel after leaving the hospital. After finishing communications with the company, I stared at my cell phone. I wondered, how is Dr. Johnson doing right now? Then, a call came in from her. "It's like telepathy. I was just thinking about you." "What are you talking about?" "Well, it seems you're okay then." "Yes, everyone was rescued, and we're staying at a hotel." "That's good to hear. You did well. Listen, I haven't slept since my shift yesterday because of today's downpour and the continuous emergencies. Dr. Johnson had been pulled into emergency medical service for a full 2 days. Yet, her complaint sounded somewhat lively. "I'm so tired I could die. I wish I could have some wine. Let's go when things settle down." "Well, that sounds wonderful." Her words trailed off into sleep, and her breathing became steady, so I quietly put down the phone without hanging up, not to wake her. Due to the hotel being a refuge for many, Michael and I had to share a room, which was unfortunate, but it might have been better than being alone. It had been a long day. It was also a day when I faced the preciousness of life firsthand. I felt grateful for my work and my life. Perhaps thanks to Michael's snoring serving as background music, I was able to sleep soundly. Despite the schedule changes, we successfully completed the delivery. We also managed to secure a new contract and received praise from Alex for being a good team. Michael helps me out with math, which I still struggle with. He always follows me fearlessly to any sales destination. Work has become more enjoyable than ever before. Years later, on a peaceful morning, I was sipping my usual coffee when I spotted a familiar face in a newspaper insert. It was Tyler, who was always in his work clothes when we were together in night school. Dressed sharply in a suit, he was pictured in a recruitment ad alongside a young man who appeared to be an employee. He had achieved his dream. His photo showed a great smile. "Look at this, Tyler from night school. He's become a respectable company president," I mentioned to Dr. Johnson. "Wow, that's impressive. He's really making a mark." Dr. Johnson peered over at the advertisement through the video call screen. Though Dr. Johnson and I kept in touch, our relationship wasn't casually defined by love or romance. Maybe that was just my perception, but we had always maintained a comfortable distance. Achieved dreams make for beautiful smiles, just like yours. What? I couldn't hear you well. The signal is bad. Then I'll tell you when you are back to America. I'll look forward to it. Don't forget to bring the wine. I put away the insert and reflected on the past. Achieving dreams isn't solely about educational background, nor can it always be accomplished with just determination. But with strong convictions, the path becomes clear. How to walk that path is up to oneself. I'm determined to proceed without hesitation. The guidance is already within my heart. Flipping the calendar, eagerly awaiting the comeback of Dr. Johnson, I headed to the office.